So close, and yet so far. Let's get started.
Another race for the world's greatest driver, Juan Manuel Fangio.
Former world champion Jim Clark leapt into the lead. That's Clark's Lotus going like a bomb.
And James Hunt is the world champion by just one single point.
By being a racing driver, you are under risk all the time. And if you no longer go for a gap that exists, you're no longer a racing driver.
And that is Michael Schumacher ahead, the world champion.
To become a four-time world champion, Sebastian Vettel, Lewis Hamilton, champion of the world.
That's for all the kids out there who dream the impossible.
Max Verstappen is champion of the world.
Oh my God! Max Verstappen, you are the world champion! The world champion!
Welcome back to F1 in Review, episode 34. Now, before we get going, a small amount of housekeeping, as we have been away for a couple of weeks, and you may well be wondering where we've been. Well, unfortunately, the universe conspired against us. I was horrendously ill, completely lost my voice, obviously not good for a podcast. Angus went off on holiday, and Tom is currently wisely spending his time sitting various exams. So a reminder that we do this for fun outside of our careers and our day-to-day jobs. It is a passion project for us. Formula One is very much one of our side passions. And so sometimes life just gets in the way. However, we are back. And with housekeeping out of the way, we pick up the F1 story after Mexico and the final sprint race of the season in Brazil. And we begin with, I think, the most surprising topic of this week. I definitely didn't see it coming. Having to fail to finish the race with either cars in Mexico, Aston Martin found themselves super competitive. In Brazil, with Lance Stroll qualifying in third and Fernando Alonso qualifying in fourth. In the race on Sunday, Alonso held off Perez for a photo finish across the line ahead of Perez by 0.053 of a second. Woo! That's not a very big distance. Now, taking third place on the podium for Alonso, which was great to see him back up there, and he looked to be as excited as the rest of us were. So, is this the start of an Aston Martin comeback, Angus, or is it just a lucky combination of factors leading to a bit of an anomaly this weekend?
I love the idea that they can still have a comeback with 2 races to go.
Yeah. Well, come back to the top, I guess, rather than anything else. But to be fair, like at the start of this season, he gave us great hope that they would be one day back at the start and back at the top of the field and be competitive. I say one day. That team has never really been at the top of the field, but I guess like maybe talking more about Alonso there and his ongoing quest, which seems to go on forever to get that third world championship. He's not given up just yet. We'll get on to him and how astonishing it is that a 42-year-old man is that good at a professional sport, especially one as exerting as motor racing. But yeah, you're right. A real shot in the arm this weekend for Aston Martin. I want to attribute some of their success to the big slice of luck that they got from qualifying, because lest we forget, if qualifying had not been delayed due to some bits on the track from the support races, we would never actually have run into that biblical rainstorm. It would have come literally right at the end of qualifying. But as it was, it came 4 or 5 minutes in. Aston Martin made the most of their laps and ended up third and fourth on the grid. Yeah.
And we had Lance Stroll do what he sometimes does, where he'll have a few awful weekends in a row and then he'll out of nowhere just do great.
Yeah,
qualified third, came fifth. Like, that's inexplicable if you look at his season.
Yeah, it's not consistent, is it?
No, he literally lacks consistency, but he managed to stick it up there. And then Charles Leclerc bins it in the wall, and you've got
that wasn't his fault though. The
yes.
Leclerc wall problem was a hydraulic failure. So I wouldn't say
fair enough.
I wouldn't say that he didn't do the traditional like overcooked it, warming up your tyres into the wall.
He didn't do the binning. The car did the binning for him.
Yeah, exactly.
Then all of a sudden they're second and third on the grid, based on the fact Leclerc is no longer there. Then they absolutely butcher the start. You saw both Aston Martins get sandwiched or swamped by Norris on the inside, Hamilton on the outside. But after that, Mercedes dropped back. Alonso and Stroll got ahead of him. Perez came through, and we saw that phenomenal photo finish where, like, Alonso, you just have to give so much credit for. You can just tell he's so wily and wise, and just the way he positions his car, and he's just the absolute expert at knowing what to do. Even that final corner of the final lap, you watch it back, and Perez goes slightly up the inside into that corner. Now, on first look, you think, right, Alonso's gone too wide there. He's not positioned his car correctly. But if you think about it, looking back, he's almost allowed a little gap, enticed Perez to go in there, and then Perez has got a tighter line, which means his turning circle out the corner isn't as straight, and therefore he loses traction. Now, I would say that's skillful, personally.
Also, I guess on that, it shows a difference between the two drivers, because one thing we know about Alonso is he can take different lines. If you look all the way back after summer break to Zandvoort, Alonso in free practice was going around and he found that there was extra traction on the lower parts of the track, which would allow him in the race to take some different lines and get round. What's interesting is Alonso was finding different lines to beat Perez, but Perez wasn't necessarily looking at Alonso and thinking, right, well, I better do something different this time to try and get past him. He kept kind of doing the same thing over again and staying behind.
Yeah. It's just so wily and so clever, and it's been a year where Aston Martin have had a good car for a lot of it, but without Alonso's performance, they would be, well, definitely much more in a battle with Alpine than they would be in a battle with McLaren. I find it astonishing that Alonso is in that car. It's 2 races to go. He's still in 4th place in the championship. Now, realistically, on pace, he's going to get, I think Norris is probably going to overtake him, and so probably is Sainz, because they're both within 10 points and they have a faster car. But for Alonso to get just under 200 points in that car, and bear in mind he didn't get a single podium in the 7 year, until the start of the season. In 8 years he got 1 podium, I think, which was in Qatar with the Alpine. He'd gone so many years out the sport, or with that dog of a McLaren, several times, getting no podiums. Then this year he's stuck it on the podium 8 times, and a couple of those he had genuine chances to win and to compete. And it's just, as much as Aston Martin had a storming weekend, and they've given themselves a bit more hope in that battle for 4th with McLaren, although I think there's still a pace deficit to McLaren for sure. And Norris is just on absolute fire right now. He's on phenomenal form. Despite that, I think it's still a great weekend for Aston Martin. They can take great credit for it. You saw how ecstatic the engineers were just when he crossed the line. They were just absolutely buzzing, and they haven't experienced that feeling since Zandvoort when they got that podium. They've had a few races where they've been off the pace, especially that double header in USA and Mexico. But they really had something to celebrate this weekend, didn't they?
They did. I think what's weird about Aston Martin at the moment, though, is Alonso's been saying things like, "Oh, well, we're mixing and matching upgrades," and Alonso also asked for the previous floor, the floor that wasn't upgraded. They brought the upgraded floors, and then Alonso said, "I don't like this, and we'll go back. We'll go back to the old floor." And so, whilst it's worked this weekend, clearly it worked. I feel like they're in they kind of don't necessarily know why, or if they do know why, then they haven't exactly been like, "Yes, it's all of the fabulous upgrades that we brought." They've been very, very quiet about it. And it is worth thinking about whether or not they will be able to continue an upward trajectory. Because if, in my opinion at least, a team that doesn't know why they're doing well will find it very difficult to upgrade the car going forward. And bear in mind that they had a lot of engineers come over from Red Bull to help them. I do find it odd that they are struggling as they are. I think it's not too late for Aston Martin with their battle with McLaren for 4th place. The difference now, believe it or not, is only 21 points. And given that there are 2 drivers for each team, a bit of unlucky bit here or DNF there, could actually switch things around. So, moving to that second part of the question is, given what Aston Martin have done in the previous race, but also thinking about where they've got as a season as a whole, can you see them challenging McLaren at all? Or is it now just solidifying, a good 5th place and maximising their points overall?
Yeah, I think solidifying is the best way to do it. I think that you look at them, they've got 261 points, and you think, can they get 300 points by the end of the season? Well, they have to get 20 points each race, the next 2, without a sprint, so not necessarily possible. I'd say if I was them, you can say at the end of the season that Fernando Alonso has got 4th. If he's got top 5 in the Drivers' Championship in a car which has been 4th or 5th fastest for most of the season, I think that's a hell of an achievement. So I'd almost be focusing on Alonso and getting him higher up in the championship, if that's possible. But yeah, you say, solidifying's fair because they now have a uncatchable advantage over Alpine, so they're going to finish at least 5th, which would be their highest finish as a team since I think 2020 when they had the last year they were Racing Point. So they're already going to finish on a positive regardless. And yeah, probably more about, I agree with you, like consolidating, solidifying, because McLaren are probably too quick for them in terms of overall pace, even Norris on his own.
So let's think about the drivers' one, because one of the things that kind of happened whilst we were away was a whole load of rumours started swelling up, didn't they? That Fernando Alonso was going to leave. And I saw some crazy rumours. He was going to leave and join Red Bull. He was going to leave and join Ferrari again or something like that. And to be honest, I think I even said at the time, I was thinking, well, actually, do you know what? Why would Fernando Alonso, 2-time world champion, one of the best drivers ever, why would he stay at Aston Martin? Because it's a team that's floundering. It's just going backwards. I was thinking, well, given what they've done in the last half of this year, they may well be even worse next year, 8th or 9th. Why would he want to be there? But with what we've seen in Brazil, do you think Alonso is going to stay? Should he stay in Aston Martin?
The thing for me is that where else does he go? And someone might say, well, Red Bull, duh, because he's been linked there. But I think that the whole swirl about Perez and the rumours with him, I think, has gone a bit too far. I think realistically, he will stay. He won't go anywhere. Red Bull want to keep him. He doesn't have to finish 2nd in the championship, but it'd be nice if he did. Maybe ignore the fact that he's still got less than half the points of Verstappen this season. But I think that's a reflection of how dominant Verstappen has been rather than anything else. And also you've got people saying, oh, well, what if next year they have rivals being closer and as a result you need that second driver to gather more points? I still think Red Bull have enough. I think Verstappen is just on another level at the moment. So him going to Red Bull, couldn't see. He won't go. The thing is, Alonso, he's burned bridges at so many places in his career that he won't. He's burned bridges at Ferrari, McLaren, and Alpine already, and Mercedes. They've got their world champion driver and they've got their future team leader. So for me, unless he forced it, I think if he went into Red Bull, he would seriously destabilise it. I just think he has that characteristic, and I know at the moment, and this season he's been actually rather calm and sort of actually a force for good in Aston Martin. He's very sort of chummy and pally with Lance Stroll earlier in the season, but I can just see him going into Red Bull and just absolutely tearing things up. And going, right, my last ever chance to win the title. I'm in the best car on the grid. Let me see if I can beat this Dutch titan in Max Verstappen. So I don't see it personally. I swear Alonso's been linked to Red Bull every September and October for the last 10 years. I feel like that's just a recycled rumour.
Well, one day it must be right. That's why.
Yeah.
You can be bound every time.
I know. Ironically, one thing which I remember reading was that Alonso was... this is a long time ago, but before he joined Ferrari back in 2010, he was approached to join Red Bull because he'd left Renault and that had gone sour, and he turned down Red Bull for Ferrari. So imagine the turn of events in history if you'd had a young Sebastian Vettel partnered by a prime Fernando Alonso at Red Bull. How differently things might have worked out, but. Yeah, I don't see him going to Red Bull. I love the fact, I have to mention this, I love the fact that in the press conference, he referenced journalists like stirring up rumours, and he said, without clarifying, he said, for those that did the rumours, there will be consequences. Sounds like some sort of like gangster threat there. I don't know what he's on about, but I'd love to know, strangely.
He's going to bring his wrath. It was a funny comment. I mean, it's kind of up there with, some of the other crazies, but crazy things that he's sort of said over the years and done. But I think to be honest, I think what he was saying was, if you keep putting rumors, maybe in courts and things like that. I mean, it can't be good as a driver when you're trying to settle into a team and everyone's kicking up stories and rumors and things that you're going to be leaving, because even if they're not true, your team principal, your mechanics, they can't be sure. No one's ever quite sure what you're thinking. And if I was Alonso, though, to be honest, at the end of the Mexico Grand Prix, I thought, yeah, he's leaving. He said that Aston Martin were no longer fighting for anything. What a weird moment, really. I think that's really going to be marked as a low point for the team. Double DNF, not fighting for anything. You're off the back of Lance Stroll just failing to get out of Q1 over and over and over. And Lawrence's other favourite son isn't getting much performance out of the car either. It's just a terrible moment for the team. And so I think what this weekend was a real morale boost for them both Aston Martin in general and also for Fernando Alonso. I mean, there's no chance of Lance Stroll leaving the team, well, unless he wants to. That's the only way he's leaving, isn't it, really? Given that he's basically just glued to the second seat there. But what I did like was, after qualifying, there was a wonderful press conference with Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll, and they were so happy. It's such a genuine happiness. It's one of those rare moments in F1 where you get to see something really lovely. It's up there with like Kevin Magnussen getting pole position this time last year, and that a superb happiness. Or when a driver wins their first race, or maybe even world championship. But you always get a different type of happiness. It's not just like I'd like to thank my fans and I'm so excited. It's a real joy, and I don't know. It was really nice to see that pure happiness appear again. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see whether or not this was a fluke. If it's not, I can't see Alonso leaving. But if it is, I don't know. I predict he won't be there for very much longer, as he will be, heading back to Ferrari or something to help them there. But we can't hang around with Aston Martin too long, simply because we are going to run out of time to cover some of the other topics that we have to cram into this podcast. So whilst Aston Martin goes forward, unfortunately, Mercedes goes backwards in a weekend that Toto Wolff said was the worst ever, which I think has got a short memory, because I'm pretty sure Abu Dhabi 2021 takes that proud spot. But he said the Mercedes car performance was inexcusable, and it was terrible. What a terrible race. Not only were Hamilton going backwards and Russell going backwards in the race, but Russell didn't even finish. He had an overheating issue, a critical overheating issue. So it's a good job they retired him before that got dangerous. So I think we'll kick this off really with what's happened to Mercedes, Angus. Where you are a Mercedes fan, you are following the base, their target audience by all this. And how are you feeling right now?
Not great. It's been pretty shocking. I think what really struck me the most in the most recent race was the lack of ability to stop the tyres degrading, which I think has been a real strength of Mercedes over the past couple of years. They've been able to actually manage their tyres well and manage the tyre life well, and it's got them a lot of success, even in the last couple of years where they've had to grind out some good results amongst a slower car than the dominant years they had. But it was really striking how once the race restarted and it got past the safety car part of the race on Sunday, they just went backwards. And sure, George Russell had that engine issue, which meant that he had to prematurely retire towards the end of the race with 14 laps to go. Even then, he was running in 11th. He was running out the points at that time. And Hamilton himself just had a really rubbish race. He finished closer to Tsunoda in 9th than he did to any of the top 5, including the Aston Martins, who've supposedly been struggling massively in recent races. And it's just, I think that it reflects how Mercedes, it sort of sums up Mercedes over the last couple of years, these last couple of races, in that they had a couple of races where they drove really well, they got some good results. I mean, there was some real encouragement, especially from the US Grand Prix, where Hamilton overtook Norris right towards the end. He was closing on Verstappen, and realistically they could have won that race had they not messed up the strategy a bit. And you thought, right, here we go, we're back in business. But then they followed up with, sure, a great weekend in Mexico where they ran well again, but then a bit of a stinking weekend just now where they were just slow and not doing great. Interesting development this week where the man who was technical director, Mike Elliott, so he succeeded the previous technical director, James Allison, who has won multiple championships. He worked for Ferrari, he worked for Benetton with Michael Schumacher a long time ago. And he left the team. He was the man who, after Abu Dhabi Gate, for the new season 2022, the new regulations, they came up with, you may remember that car with the skinniest side pods you've ever seen, the zero side pods, effectively. It looked a bit like the no pods. It looked a bit like a Coke can that had been squashed in. And he was the man responsible for that. And sure, they gave him another chance to revamp it, but this year they did a similar design against Lewis Hamilton's wishes. And once again, Hamilton's been very public saying that it was against my wishes, and once again, it has ended up with a poor season, and he has mutually left the team. These things are always mutual, aren't they?
Yeah, they're never like, we haven't mutually agreed this. We
that's
just
the thing.
Kicked him out, and he's upset about that.
Yeah, but
mutually agreed.
But yeah, it's interesting times. I think for Mercedes fans, you're just sort of hoping for some light around the tunnel. Lewis Hamilton was asked on the weekend about the chances for next year, and he said, "You know what, Red Bull are very clear. We won't be able to catch up with them for a couple of years." So nice and optimistic there. So we'll see how it goes leading into next year. But not great for Mercedes. George Russell as well. I feel like he's not dropped off a cliff this season, but he's had a pretty low-key season, hasn't he? He's only got one podium, and that was all the way back in Spain. And that race was like back in June or something. That was a long, long time ago. 4th of June. So it's been a bit of a meh season for Mercedes. They've got second. They're looking all right for second place. They've got to maintain a 20-point advantage over Ferrari for the rest of the season to rubber stamp that. What do you think from the outside? From the outside, how do you see Mercedes and how they're going overall?
It's a difficult one because, again, I never like to put too much emphasis on a single race. And it is important to note that this is just, one of many, and there is a reason why Mercedes is in second place. But it is worth knowing that 20 points is not many. And, it's kind of weird, isn't it, that we have 20 points between 5th and 4th, and 20 points between 3rd and 2nd. And so as much as the McLaren versus Aston Martin race is going to be quite exciting, this Mercedes versus Ferrari one is also going to be really exciting. It's kind of a good name for a movie, isn't it? Ferrari versus Mercedes, that sort of exciting, gets your heart pounding sort of thing. Hans Zimmer will do the music again. And if I'm honest, this was unlucky for Ferrari. This was actually a really big hit for Ferrari. I think, to be honest, Mercedes were quite lucky this weekend because Leclerc's car decided didn't fancy doing the race. If you think about it, getting 8th position and a DNF for Mercedes could have spelt real disaster because of the competitiveness of the Ferrari around this track. this could have been a huge moment for Mercedes, and Ferrari could have got much, much closer. Could have got an extra sort of 5 or 6, 7, 8 points towards them. These things make a massive difference. I mean, I'm not saying Leclerc would only scrape by 8 points, but you get my point, really. It could have been 12 points difference. 20 is just enough that you can hang on to the end. When it's below 10, you're thinking, right, this could be all or nothing, really. Especially as a sprint race weekend as well. So, yeah, as much as this was a bad weekend for Mercedes, they were lucky that it was also a terrible weekend for Ferrari as well, with one of their cars being out on a super competitive weekend for them. Well, according by science data anyway. And we do know that Ferraris were fast around here this weekend. It's just a fact there. So, yeah, again, Mercedes have always been slightly jammy, haven't they? And yet again, they might still be. So I would say they're not out of it. And, well, it's going to be an unknown, completely unknown when we go to Las Vegas. I mean, firstly, the temperature is going to be weird because it was predicted to be 4 degrees Celsius. If you don't work in Celsius, if you prefer freedom degrees, I think that's in the 30s, maybe 30-something degrees. But yeah, 4 degrees Celsius. That's cold, really, really cold. So who knows how the different teams will be able to react to that. I have no idea how these cars work in the cold. My gut feeling is they'll struggle to maintain tyre temperature. So if you are harder on your tyres, maybe then you'll be slightly more competitive. So maybe the Mercedes will be good there. I don't know. Only time will tell with that one. But to be honest, it's not looking good, is it? Getting rid of Elliott is not an optimistic sign. And completely scrapping their 2 years of development is not a good sign either. But sometimes it's things like that make the biggest amount of difference. And it's, I mean, it worked for Aston Martin, didn't it? They dumped their 2021 design completely. Do you remember the original crocodile design, as it was dubbed? Big square sides. They basically jumped out of that into a Red Bull design, and then were really competitive at the beginning of this year. So, I'm not saying so. It's definitely not over them this year. But given what's happened to McLaren moving forward, Ferrari seems to be getting stronger as well. The gaps are all closing. You have to wonder: is it going to be luck and a bit of a fluke that Mercedes get over the line in second? And at the moment, I would say it's a 50-50 between Ferrari and Mercedes for second place. I just wonder. It's like every year, Angus, we always wonder. It's like, what if Ferrari were just less Ferrari, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do still find, if we think about Mercedes, I do still find it astonishing that Mercedes, the once dominant force, are currently 400 points behind at the Constructors' Championship to Red Bull, and they're in second place. That gap is just astonishing. Yeah, it's completely ridiculous, really, how much the tables have turned completely on them. But I guess also think of it one way is that every team has their day. Red Bull had 4 years in a row where they won the Constructors and they were dominant, and they won all the Drivers' Championships as well. And then they spent 7 years with nothing and being thereabouts, and then having off days, having good days. And then they came back eventually. So could the same happen to Mercedes? Potentially. You never know. But
I definitely think so.
Yeah,
it's swings given the amount of resources behind them. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It is always like that. To be honest, if I'm going to be completely honest here, I am quite hopeful that they don't. And that's because my boy Lando Norris and his partner in crime, Oscar Piastri, seems to be absolutely smashing it. I know it's not been so great for Piastri in the last couple of races. He has struggled a bit, and he did have damage in Mexico that caused him issues. And then in this race, it was just bad luck again. A rogue tyre after the collision on turn 1 hit the back of him, and it wasn't really right after that. But to be honest, I think McLaren are as competitive as I've seen them in a very long time. And with Mercedes out the way, I would quite like that. I quite like them to stay out of the way because it was crazy. What's really crazy about this race is you had Max Verstappen way ahead in the lead. Okay, but Lando Norris was only 8 seconds behind him. And then it was 34 seconds until Fernando Alonso.
Yeah.
If in any other year, you'd be like, that McLaren is competitive, really competitive, dominant, one might say. A 34-second gap between you and the car behind, second and third, is a dominant car. It's just really annoying that the Red Bull is even more dominant than my precious McLaren. So, yeah, if I'm going to be selfish for a minute, I would quite like Mercedes not to be back on top form, because that means less threats. I'm desperate I really want to see Lando Norris take a win, because he is racking up that glorious tally of number of second place finishes or pole positions without a single win. I mean, even Oscar Piastri has technically got a race win, not a Grand Prix win, but a race win. If you believe that diminishes the statistic of race win, then of course ignore me. I did see that there was a lot of arguments going on about whether or not a sprint race should be counted as a race win or whatever, but I'm going to hang on to it because it's the first race win I've had for a very long time. I still look back at Monza, glorious Monza, 2021. So I would like them to stay in third, maybe, with Ferrari. That'd be really, really handy. But I have a funny feeling, with all the resources behind them, that Mercedes is going to be up there very soon. And yeah, it's just a matter of time, as you say. They always, all teams develop towards the most competitive team. Everything, it's like evolution. Evolution always eventually turns into crabs. I don't know if you've seen this. There's basically like 4 different evolutionary strands that end up looking like crabs. So there's always that joke that Mother Nature loves crabs. Well, Formula One teams are a bit like that. That if there is one completely dominant super form, you will eventually, all of them will look like that. So whilst we've had this differentiation between the teams in terms of looks and designs now, by the end, we're basically going to have 8, 9, maybe 10 copies of the same dominant car. But where it gets really interesting is the things you can't see. And that's when the development resources and extra pieces of equipment here or there really make the difference. Because in Formula One, you are allowed to copy anything you can see. You can't, however, you're not really supposed to be able to copy. You definitely can't share. That's what got Aston Martin in trouble. Things that you can't necessarily, you can't see. And so, for example, Aston Martin got in trouble because they were found to have the same, I think it was the internal brake ducts as the Mercedes, and there was no way they could see that from the outside, and they couldn't prove they developed it on their own. So anyway, there's a long way of saying that Mercedes might well eventually just look like a Red Bull with a Mercedes powertrain. And I think that could be a pretty good force of nature.
Well, with Mercedes, I mean, you talk about them being hoping for them to be on the up or see how they do with their design. Will McLaren get there first? That's my question, because McLaren are having an absolutely storming end to the season, and they are proving that even though they had a horrible first half of the season, which is summarised by this, one of my favourite stats I found this year. If I asked you, Tristan, which driver, I've probably hinted at it with the way I'm phrasing this, but if I asked you which driver on the grid this year has finished in 17th on the most occasions, who would be the answer to that question?
I'm going to go with... Oh, this is so difficult. Logan Sargent.
No.
But who is it?
I was waiting to see if I was saying just leaving a nice pause.
This is the quality content people tune in for.
It's
Lando Bottas?
It's Lando Norris.
It's Lando Norris. It's Lando Norris.
Yeah, he finished 17th in Bahrain, Saudi, Miami, and Spain. Remarkable, that, isn't it? Considering now he's absolutely racking up podiums on a regular basis, and he's got, I think, 7 or 8 podiums now this season.
Yeah. Wow.
Which is ridiculous, because he's really like, I think he's really stepped up this year, because sure, the last 2 years he utterly destroyed Daniel Ricciardo, But I think this year is the year where he's really emerged as a top-level driver, like fully. He's got a strong challenge this year from Piastri, who I think's actually tailed off a little bit in the last couple of races.
I'm going to put down to bad luck.
Sure, he's had a bit of bad luck. I'll give you that with what happened in Brazil, and also previous couple of races. He got knocked out at the start in Austin, didn't he? Because he collided with Ocon, I think. But I think it's overall his qualifying pace has tailed off a little bit, I'd say. But the point with Norris, he's really taking advantage of the qualifying pace and the race pace this McLaren now has. I know that some people are saying that McLaren could be strong contenders for the championships next year if they start well. I'll believe it when I see it, because the last 2 years especially they've had poor starts. Remember last year in 2022 when Norris got, I always remember he got 7th in Saudi, and he did that interview on TV where he said, well, I didn't expect to finish 7th, I thought it'd come like 17th. Very upbeat, but the car was genuinely that poor at that time. And this year, 2 17ths in the road to start the year. Things were looking down the dumps once again, but they've really brought it back. Really, really have. They've developed exceptionally well, and they sort of found that sweet spot around Austria, and since then they've just flown, really, and hence why they've gone from battling with Alpine and Williams in the constructors to overtaking Aston Martin, and they're not going to finish a million miles away from Ferrari and Mercedes, quite possibly. It's been a really storming end to the season. The one downside is Lando Norris is on the verge of some, not on the verge, but he's getting towards some records, possibly. I believe he is close to the record for the most podiums without a race win in Formula One, which I think is held by, you'll remember Nick Heidfeld. You've met him, haven't you? You've met Nick Heidfeld.
I have met Nick Heidfeld. Well remembered.
I remember when you sent us that picture of him, Goodwood. You met, was it Goodwood?
Yes, well, I met him at Festival of Speed. Nice man.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't mention it to him though. I will point that out. I was like, "Oh, hi there, you man with the most podiums for a win." I decided I'd be more friendly than that.
Yeah,
but yeah,
that's fair enough.
He's drawing with Nick Heidfeld, by the way. If you'd like to know, they both have 13 podiums without a win.
Yeah, and 13 podiums, 102 starts as well. So it's one of those where I think these statistics are good. We had this chat the other day about Max Verstappen getting his 17th win of the season out of 20. The fact that these win records and statistic records are going to be massively skewed by the fact that there's more races in the season now, and that also means if your car's not up to it, that's more races for you not to win. Like, sure, Nico Hülkenberg has done 204 races and not won a single one, but is he awful? No, he's not. He's far from awful. He's a very decent driver, but it's just the fact that he will have race after race, season after season where he's in a bottom half car, so he's never going to win. Charles Leclerc has got 5 career wins, 123 races. Like that, on the face of it, that seems awful. You'd think, God, this guy must be like pretty average at best, but he's just not quite been in the front running car ever at all in his Formula One career, other than maybe a bit last year. And Norris is having a similar thing where he's now getting into higher achieving cars, but he's not quite getting that final win. And even this weekend, he drove exceptionally well on the race. He did what I feel like the commentators reacted to it in a certain way, because it has genuinely been a while since Max Verstappen had to defend into a corner. And that sounds...
Yes, that sounds... got within 1/10 of Max.
Yeah, it sounds ludicrous. It sounds ludicrous, but I can't remember the last time Verstappen had to take the inside line on a corner to defend his position. It's been that long. But
yeah, it was a crazy bit.
Yeah, he had to do it.
Remember, though, he could only do it once. That was... So, watching it, I was like, okay, fair enough. He's got within a 10th. He hasn't quite got him. And then that was it. He fell right back, sort of within a lap. He was well over a second, 2 seconds behind Max. So what I would say is the way it's a good car, Max's car is a good car, is because Norris pushed his tyres, he pushed the McLaren to the absolute extreme and got within a 10th. And then Max just sort of kicked him behind and kept going at that speed because the Red Bull doesn't destroy its tyres. It's just so efficient with its aero. It's so efficient with its tyres that he can just, continue going at, whatever that speed is. Norris can get up to that speed, but it's like, when you do a flat out run, you're sprinting as hard as you can. Imagine that you were sprinting as hard as you can. The bloke next to you is just jogging. That's what I feel like this is like. And I think we're getting closer with McLaren. I think McLaren is getting closer to getting on par. But there is a bit of a way off just yet. The fact that Norris only finished 8 seconds behind is an achievement. I think Max is finding it funny as well because in the post-race sort of interviews and press conferences, Max made a joke, and he's in response to a question about whether or not he felt under threat from Norris. He was like, "Well, it's like holding out a cookie to a child and then taking it away." So clearly, Max doesn't think he's under that much of a threat.
Yeah, they are super dominant, and it's going to be a while, which is why it's maybe our expectations have lowered that much that we've gone from wanting race-winning battles to, he had to go take the inside line into turn 1. That was nice. But, it was a shame that was the last we saw of the battle. Verstappen eventually was able to stretch his legs and get an 8-second gap to Norris by the end. And maybe we should, I think, perhaps one of our closing topics, we can acknowledge, I don't know if it was on our original list of things to talk about, we can acknowledge that it kind of went unnoticed, but the record for most wins in a season has been broken for the second year in a row. Max Verstappen with his 17th win out of 20, which is quite astonishing. That means that now, out of the last 43 races, if we go back to Abu Dhabi 2021, that means Verstappen has won 34 of them, which is absolutely remarkable. And it makes you wonder, actually. Sure, there have been dominant spells in Formula 1 history, but has there been one this dominant in terms of sheer volume of races? He's won 79% of races over the last 2 seasons, which is utterly mind-boggling. And you talk about all these drivers of immense talent like Russell, Leclerc, Norris, Sainz, Piastri, Perez, all these drivers. I reckon if you added up the wins, obviously, if you take out Lewis Hamilton and Fernando Alonso, because they have a high amount of wins, but if you take out, other than Hamilton and Alonso, if you add up the rest of the grid and their race wins, I think Max would have more than them. I honestly think if I did the maths right now, he's been that dominant over the years that other drivers haven't had the chance. The only one would be Bottas because he has a few wins, and Ricciardo, but otherwise Verstappen has 52 wins, whilst the rest of the grid minus Alonso and Hamilton probably have about 40 to 50. So it's just astonishing how dominant it is. And whilst we can moan and groan about possibly a dominant side to Formula 1 at the moment and a dominant driver, at the end of the day, we sometimes have to sit back and appreciate brilliance and just pure dominance and a sportsman or sportswoman being at the top of their game and being unstoppable, because it does happen sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely, it does happen. And what you were sort of grasping at, I think, is the highest percentage of wins in an F1 season. And if you would like to know, he's broken that record, as you rightly said, 77.3%. Beforehand, it was a record set in 1952 by Ascari, very famous racing driver. And he had a win percentage of 75%.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's an absolutely ridiculous stat. And also weird, because at the time, so Ascari got 6 out of 8 races. That's why he got 75%. 8 races. God, that's not that many. Michael Schumacher, if you'd like to know, is currently in third, taking 13 out of 18 wins with a 72.2%.
Very good.
Yeah, so yeah, it's I mean, these names up there. If you'd like to know, if you look at the top 10, right, Hamilton is only mentioned once. He's currently in 8th with 11 out of 17 races won. Verstappen is up there twice. He's in 6th and 1st.
Wow.
Right. The other name up there twice.
Sebastian Vettel?
No, but you are right. Vettel is on there. He's currently 5th, 13 out of 19 races, 2013. That was a dominant season. The other name that's on there twice is Michael Schumacher. So 3rd and 9th. There you go. So if you were ever wondering is Verstappen going to be, listed as one of the F1 greats? Well, he's already listed amongst the F1 greats in many different statistics.
Yeah, Max Verstappen, it's crazy how Verstappen has gone from young and promising driver who was on the verge of doing something special with the world title to now being not just modern great, but all-time great, arguably. Because sure, it helps. Yeah, it sure helps that his car is unbelievable, but he's just very good. He's very good at being able to. He's just the full package. He used to be aggressive and quick, but too aggressive, if you know what I mean. But now he is calculated. He judges when to go for an overtake. His time management's exceptional. I can't remember the last time I saw him do a bad start off the line. Like, he always seems to nail it every time, whether he's in 1st or 2nd. Racecraft, he's toned down his aggression, but he's still like. I remember. Well, I don't remember, but I've seen videos. Michael Schumacher was notoriously like on the ragged edge, and you'd have drivers complain about him. Verstappen's got a bit of that as well. He will push you. He will not let you get an inch at all when he's defending from you. He's completely committed to the sport, but also he doesn't make it his absolute life. I get the impression he has this sim racing team, doesn't he, off track? He has a lot going on in his personal life in terms of just to keep him busy and keep him fresh. Just a complete all round package. And yeah, we've had this discussion many times before, but we can see him, going up and up and up in those rankings. 2 more wins this year, and he overtakes Sebastian Vettel, and then he's only got Hamilton and Schumacher to catch. And it'll be a while because he'd have to win another 40 races, but he'll probably do that by the end of next year.
And so ends another episode of the Max Verstappen celebratory podcast. I mean, F1 in review. Thank you very much for listening if you've got to this point. And what a couple of weeks it has been. A triple header of F1. We have no race coming up this weekend, but we will be going to a brand new one just after that, Las Vegas, where it's expected to be cold, but also a bit of a novelty as well. They're already planning the pre-show, so tune in from Wednesday next week for the beginning of the F1 weekend. Let's hope the actual race can live up to the expectations that have been put upon this particular circuit. But next week we've got plenty more to discuss, including the rise of the lower divisions, such as AlphaTauri's return to the top, Daniel Ricciardo returning back in, and also Perez's performance increase as well. Perhaps the pressure has finally been lifted off him, given what Christian Horner has been saying this week. But until next time, thank you very much for listening. Do follow us on our social media accounts. That's X, formerly Twitter. We also post short snippets of these podcasts in 1-minute convenient bites on TikTok. And of course, you can listen to us and follow us on your favourite podcasting platform or on YouTube if you prefer the audio visual side of things. But until next time, thank you very much for tuning, and we'll speak to you next week.